Mythopoeic. The word means myth-making, and it's the name of the fantasy society that is coming to Weatherford. One part fan club and one part literary academics, the Mythopoeic Society was formed in the late 1960s. This year, they're hosting a conference in the town where an Oklahoma librarian has made Southwest Oklahoma State University the home for the Society's fantastical archive. Since 2017, archivist and librarian Phillip Fitzsimmons has digitized about 5,000 items that have been downloaded more than 1.5 million times. Members have come across the US and the world to attend the conference and discuss fantasy. In Oklahoma, on this episode of the Okie Geek podcast is librarian and archivist Phillip Fitzsimmons.
Hello, my name is Phillip Fitzsimmons. I am the University Archivist and Special Collections Librarian at the Southwestern Oklahoma State University, SWOSU, in Weatherford, Oklahoma. This weekend, the 24th through the 27th, I am the chair that will be hosting the Mythcon 54 in Weatherford, Oklahoma at the Stafford Air and Space Museum.
What is the Mythopoeic Society?
The Mythopoeic Society is a blend of fan and academic people who are interested in both get together at these conferences and we read academic papers, but we also have activities like golf and ball, which, if you'll recall in The Hobbit, there's a scene, the narrator describes how Bilbo Baggins' ancestor knocked an orc's head off. It went into a rabbit hole, and so he killed the biggest orc and invented golf at the same time. So in the evenings, one of our things is we do golf and ball, which is a reenactment of that scene in The Hobbit. There's sort of semi-golf related things with the head of a doll. And so it's a lot of fun. We also have on our Saturday night entertainment nights, we'll have a costume contest, and some people do wear costumes. A lot of times they don't. I'm really happy. One of our SWOSU music students is going to be performing at the entertainment dressed as a character that she has created named Ophelia, who is half fairy, half dragon, and this character soothes dragons by singing to them. So what I'm getting at is just that it is a conference, a fantasy conference that in which basically what you get is people from all over the United States and all over the world will come here, or since it is a hybrid event, they log in through Zoom and can interact with other people who love fantasy as much as they do. So this year, the theme is Get Your Fantasy Kicks on Route 66, so that we are a part of the big centennial celebration of Route 66. And we've got some papers that do harken back to that. I'm doing a panel called From Dust Bowl to Digital, Fueling Your Research on MythSoc Archives. And there's The Road Goes Ever On, Teaching Tolkien to College Today, on road trip, or we're taking the hobbits to Isengard, The Rhetoric of the Road, The Romantic Journey as Map of Myth. That's by one of our keynote speakers. So as you can see, it's a combination of pop with academic papers and activities.
Yeah. Um, I'd love to just know more about the history of the society and just sort of its reach. You said that uh, it's beyond the United States, even.
Yes, absolutely. We've got members in 13 countries. So the Mythopoeic Society started in 1967. A young man named Glenn Goodnight in Los Angeles had a birthday party in the park for Bilbo and Frodo Baggins. He was a third grade school teacher, and it was very successful. I I didn't get to see him. He died before I started attending the conferences, but from what I've read and seen, he seemed to be charismatic, and he was a self um, actuator. He would do things. So first it was the party, and then he started organizing book discussions all over the Los Angeles area. And then by 1970, he started editing it was the blend of popular, a zine. It was a blend of being a zine and an academic journal called Mythlore, which was about mythology and fantasy, particularly fantasy uh, literature. And that went on for several years. And a Mythprint is the newsletter of the organization. And within a few years, there is a literary journal called the Mythic Circle that publishes short fiction and poetry um, about fantasy again. So he would keep on adding more things that were being done. And I think around 70, 72, they started having the annual conferences. And for probably the first half a dozen of them or so, they were in California. And then it's just started, next thing you know, it's in Las Vegas. And uh, then over the years, they have been in a number of states, including Hawaii, and one year it was in Oxford, and so um,
Is this the first time that it's going to be in Oklahoma?
it is the third time that it's been in Oklahoma. One of our really notable scholars is Janet Croft, who is the editor of Mythlore. And she's also edited and contributed to a number of academic books, such as Tolkien and War. Uh, so she was a librarian at the Bazell Library at the University of Oklahoma and for many years. And so twice, once she hosted the conference on campus, and they had the banquet underneath Sue the Tyrannosaurus's bones in the Sam Noble Natural History Museum. And the other time, I don't remember or know what the theme was, but I think they had it in the Student Union on campus. So this will be the third time. It's my first time to chair and organize everything. I am the University Archivist and Special Collections Librarian. I'm also uh, the administrator of the SWOSU Digital Commons, which you can just do a search for SWOSU Digital Commons to find that. And in 2017, I started, I got permission and started scanning all of the issues of Mythlore. And then when that was done, I did uh, the Mythic Circle. And when I finally got permission, I did Mythprint. So since 2017, and the Mythopoeic Society. So that's another thing you can do is just go Mythopoeic Society, SWOSU Digital Commons, and it will take you to a long list of links to the things in those collections. And we've had 1.6 million downloads internationally of the MythSoc materials, and they only represent about 16% of everything that is in the SWOSU Digital Commons.
How did the archives end up in at SWOSU?
I asked to digitize it. So I came here in 2007. My first job was um, as the government documents and digitization librarian. And all that was supposed to do was to digitize everything that was um, in this conference room. I was really good at it, and I kept finding um, new projects to do and everything. And then in 2013, the astronaut retired at that point, Thomas Stafford, donated his archive to the university, thus the library. And at that point, I knew that we needed to change our game. It went from a very simple platform and a low level scanning equipment to us getting the SWOSU Digital Commons platform in 2016. And then in 2017, I was asking Janet Croft and the rest of the stewards of the Mythopoeic Society if they would like for me to scan myth lore and put it up. And the reason I was doing that was because I knew it would be years before we would get the Stafford collection donated to us from, the museums where the stuff was originally, and some of the things were in different offices that he still had. And so they needed to come together and eventually reach us. So I wanted to do a really big project and get it done right before his stuff came, because the Stafford material, you know, that is truly a national treasure. It is the jewel in our archives. And so the university renovated the entire second floor. And part of that was to build a special archive for all of our collections. So the principal collections that we have are the Stafford collection, the SWOSU History collection, and the Mythopoeic Society collection. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So the Mythopoeic archives, was that easy to sort of source all that material? Was it just something that I guess Janet may have already, or you already had?
Well, they were eager to to have the job done, right? And so they have always had a store online, right? So they gave me two copies of every issue, which is the archival standard, so that I could put it in our vault. And it's preserved now. The physical items are definitely preserved. It's got fire prevention, humidity control, temperature control. We keep the lights off when no one's in there, things like that, so that the original items are being preserved. And then we scan and make the scans available online, which, having things online is another one of those things that helps with preservation because they don't need to be handled. It's important because one of the wisdoms of doing digital collections and the like of that is that when you have what you want is to have as many collections in the same place. And the more popular any of them are, it causes people to look at the others more. So that's one of the reasons that this is really important. Now, personally, I think that the literature of the Mythopoeic Society is just important. It is a organization that has existed since, you know, starting in 67, but truly the Mythopoeic Society by 1970. And we've had all of these journals and everything, and they are preserved. Now, they have been steady, but the circulation numbers have usually been fairly small because they are academic. And so, um, what happens is it sort of makes it so that these things will continue to exist no matter what. And not only that, but we've got all of them in one place. So finally, after we had finished the job of scanning everything and uploading uh, all of myth lore up to our platform, then JSTOR approached Janet about doing the same thing, but it's not the entire collection. So essentially, what happened is I've been a steward for a few years, 2017 or something like that, and they said to me, well, we hear about this archive that you have, and they are impressed and happy that we're getting millions of digital downloads because it means more people are aware of us, and of course we want all of our materials to go out and be useful to scholars and things, right? Um, but they'd like to see the archive. So they said, we think it's your turn to host the um, host the conference so that we can see this. And that sounded fair to me. So here we are. And on Monday, we'll have a special time where people can come in and take a look at the archive.
Yeah, the 5,000 plus different items and articles.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Um, I'd love to hear about how you got involved with this and why you decided to, you know, get so involved with the Mythopoeic Society.
Well, okay, I'm 63 and I started reading The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings when I was in middle school back in the 70s, right? And it's one of those things that I have read The Lord of the Rings over 20 times. It's just a natural love that I have for this, right? So in the early 90s, I had returned to OU to get teaching certification, and I was writing uh, lesson plans about The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien's work, and in the indexes, I kept running across these articles from a journal called Mythlore. So remember, this is the early 90s, and I would do it in ILL. And I kept noticing that all of them were coming from the same place, and that the librarian who was filling uh, the ILL was Edith Crow. So I sent her an email and said, So, how many places do have a complete run of this journal? Because I'd like to go someplace and look at all of them instead of just this article, that article that I find indexed and doing an ILL. And she said, well, there's not that many places because the subscription numbers are pretty small anyway. And so then I asked, well, is there any plans for you to scan and upload all of them in one place so that anyone can look at them? And she said, that's a nice idea, but that's just not the way things work. All right. So I got my teaching certificate and went on about my business for many years. And eventually, I think that the desire to do that, to try and be in a position where I could scan myth lore and get it up, has probably been significant to the decisions I've made so that I would return to uh, library school and become an academic librarian. And I did eventually end up in a place where I was doing that. And by 2013, I was attending the conferences. And by 2017, I was offered the position of being the official archivist of the Mythopoeic Society and have been doing the things that I've described to you.
I'd love to kind of rewind a little bit. Um, so earlier you had mentioned that mythopoeic was a term coined by Tolkien himself. I'm wondering what the definition of that word is, though.
Mythopoeic literature is when you take a pre-existing mythology or folk tradition. So it can be Christianity, it can be ancient Greek um, mythology, it can be Northern mythology, any of those, and create a fictional made up world in which they are basically this pre-existing mythology is the foundation that your fictional world is based upon. So, for instance, Tolkien was a Christian and he loved Northern mythology. So, those are the two primary sources that he built Middle Earth on. Lewis also loved Northern mythology, but he also threw in Father Christmas, and he was another Christian. And he would also have ancient Greek characters in his and the like of that. Um, so, mythopoeic literature does what I said. You take a pre existing mythology or folk tradition and make that the foundation of a fantasy world. But that's not all. It's also supposed to be literature in which you see the spiritual or personal development of the characters in the world. And it should also, at its best, help the reader to develop in those ways. So, for instance, C.S. Lewis was trying to convert children to Christianity. Uh, I can tell you there are a lot of people who the works of J.R. Tolkien inspire their spiritual development and the like of that. Uh, One of my favorite contemporaries is David R. Slayton. His both the Adam Binder series has traditions of sort of European magic And his new series, The Gods of Night and Day, are based upon ancient Greek mythology. And I think the rightness, the moral stance of the hero and his friends uh, are indicators, are examples of that sort of spiritual and personal development that I've described to you. So I know uh, the word came about when, remember that Lewis was in his early 30s before he became a Christian. And one night, Tolkien and another of the Inklings spent all night walking and talking with Lewis about God. And that was the night that Lewis began his journey of belief. And so the next morning, Tolkien sent him a poem he had written called Mythopoeia. And it is related, what was going on with them uh, is related to what he was talking about all night long. And so you have it's not a word that's used very much. Glenn Goodnight and his friends, uh, we became the Mythopoeic Society because he loved the Inklings, which included C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Charles Williams, and about 15 other Oxford Dons who were all Christians and writers. So that's how it is that you get the name the Mythopoeic Society. And the emphasis, even though, we do read all kinds of fantasy and discuss them, uh, the thing that I think that we've always shot for has been mythopoeic literature, which is about what I described to you.
Why is it important to, I guess, study fantasy literature like this and be analyzing it in ways that probably most people who read these books don't?
It's a natural thing that some people do. And so these kinds of literature will speak to folk and it gives them meaning. So it's not just a matter of hiding from the real world. Sometimes reading these books gives the reader answers as to how it is that they can survive and prosper in the real world. And so it becomes important to those of us who it does speak to. And next thing you know, it's like any other real interest where some are going to turn it into an academic discipline. And, well, it doesn't hurt when you're talking about mythopoeic literature. Uh, those Inklings were Oxford Dons, so it was doomed to be an academic um, discipline from the start, right?
Yeah. Um, so for Mythcon, is this something primarily for those academically minded? Like people shouldn't be going there expecting like a fantasy convention, right?
Not an all-out fantasy convention. But at the same time, I really would not want for someone to be expecting that they were going to Comic-Con. That's not what it is. Because you do from about noon until 5 o'clock in the evening on Friday, there are two tracks of papers that are being read, right? Uh, all day long from 9 until uh, 5 o'clock. You've got two tracks of papers being read on Saturday and Sunday and throughout the morning. But at the same time, we do have golf and bowl. We do have, the thing is, what you really want to do is to hang out with other people who love fantasy um, after the main events. Um, hey, there's the hospitality suite starting at 9:30 Central on Friday. You've got the Bardic Circle, which is people will get together and David Lenander will play the guitar and you sing songs. And a lot of them are fantasy oriented.
I'm just kind of curious what your first memory of mythopoeic literature was, whether it's reading Tolkien or C.S. Lewis, Narnia, Lord of the Rings, and just what your memory of reading one of those books is.
That is a great question. It was The Hobbit. So there I was in middle school, and I had these friends. I don't know if it was English class or what, and they kept on talking about this cool book that they were reading. And all of them had read it except for me. So I was asking about it. And so I got a copy. And yeah, this is really good. But they also kept talking about The Lord of the Rings. And I will tell you, that was a difficult book for me to get through. So I don't know if I was in the ninth grade or the eighth grade or what, but over, I'd say, 2 years of high school, I worked really hard to get so that I could get through The Lord of the Rings and understand it the way I would any other novel. So, but the thing is, no one told me that I had to read uh, The Lord of the Rings. I wanted to do it because my friends did. And, but there would also be these things in it that would draw me in, that would make it worth it, even though it was hard to read. So that was my first experience. I think the first 7 times that I read it was by the end of high school. Okay. And then after that, well, I really loved The Lord of the Rings. And it was hard. So, of course, when the Silmarillion came out in, I think, 77 or 78, you know, uh, it's like, oh boy. And have you read the Silmarillion?
That is one that is just on my list to read.
Oh, well, it's like reading the Old Testament. And I can remember at the time thinking, why? If I'm interested in reading the Old Testament, I'll read the Old Testament instead of somebody's recreation of this. But there are really good reasons because it is a religious text of the elves, it's their mythology. But I was, let me see, 40s, late 30s, something like that. I build stained glass as a hobby, okay? And when we were in Norman, I used to check out audiobooks from the library to listen to while I was doing stained glass because I was just using my hands. I wanted something for my brain. And so what I would do is intentionally pick books that I knew I was never going to sit down and read with my eyes, but that I was curious enough about them to want to listen to them to see what they were about. And I had given up on the Silmarillion. It was so hard, and I just didn't get where he was going with it. And so at some point I formally said, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to have to be happy with The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and that's just going to have to be the way that it is. But I was listening to um, The Silmarillion. It was read by a Welsh actor, and by the first 100 pages, I was hooked. I didn't have to be working on stained glass in order to be motivated to listen to it. I listened to the rest of the book, and then I went out and bought a copy and just devoured it and read it like 6 times very quickly. And then I read all of the History of Middle Earth volumes. So somewhere in there, I became a Tolkien scholar.
What is it that about those books that keeps you coming back over an entire lifetime?
It's things like when Gandalf is having his meeting with Frodo, and it is implied, but not explicitly stated, that there is um, a spirit, an acting presence behind everything, and that if you do the work, it will help you to succeed. You see what I'm saying? Uh, and somehow that was very comforting to me. And that's just one point among many that I would say that in many ways, The Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's work feeds me emotionally, psychologically, in a way that, I have lots of books that interest me that I read and the like of that, but they're not doing anything other than satisfying my curiosity or entertaining me. Uh, the Lord of the Rings certainly entertains me, but it also gives to me sort of spiritually or emotionally or something like that. Yeah.